own media. That is to say, those of us who recognize that there's something wrong with the existing media, it's not just a question of joining the existing media, though there may be a role there, but what about an alternative media which favors the interests of the people, which speaks the truth, which is not owned by millionaires and billionaires who use the press, the media, the TV in their interests? We have the capacity of developing an alternative to that, especially today with social media. So many things are possible. Everybody can create a whole range of things: film, podcast, whatever, print, word. So I think that's important. And again, that's kind of learning the lessons of history, that we have the capacity to do these things and to create things which speak to people in their own languages, in the idioms that they understand, and so on. And I think the more of that that's done, the better. And of course, not just in the continent, but also elsewhere. That's also very important, because that enables people to address the problems they want to address, not to be in any way constrained or confined by the millionaires and billionaires.
But how would this be funded?
Well, in the same way that the alternative press has always been funded. That, when we say we are our own liberators, then that's what it means. We have to find the ways of doing these things. How did the West African Students' Union finance their glossy monthly publication? How did Marcus Garvey finance Negro World? How did those, one can go on and on and on. There's so many examples.
Well, how did they?
Yeah, I was going to say, the answer is in his book, Pan-Africanism and the History, but it's a very big book. So could you tell us quickly from the book, how did they do that?
It's not a very big book. If you want a big book, I can show you a big book, because I've written a big book as well. This is a short book. And this is why we have to create our own publicity, because if we rely on other people to publicize things for us, we never get anywhere. Okay? So it's a brief book. It's very readable. It's very accessible. It has a contents page. It has an index, and you can go and look for all these things yourself.
And I have read the book. I should add that.
So then you should answer the question then.
Oh, here we go. Now, just to prove a point, basically you put your money where your mouth is. If you claim you believe in something, then that should actually be shown not just in your words, but in your actions, and that includes your money. So these groups made it a point to raise funds amongst those people who supported the ideas that they believed in, and that was what kept them going.
I mean, again, a good example, as we're in Nigeria, is West African Students' Union needed to raise money both for publicity and for, in those days in Britain, racism was legal, so they didn't have anywhere to stay. So they actually sent one of their members back to Africa to raise money in Africa. And then after 3 years of fundraising, he came back to Britain, and they had some funds to do some of the things that they wanted to do. They used to have fundraising events throughout West Africa, as well as in Britain and other places and so on. They used to have meetings in all the major churches and so on and raise money. So there are numerous examples of how you raise money. Other people have other ideas and so on. So there are these possibilities. If we want to do these things, if we think they are necessary, then we always have to find the ways of doing them. And I think that those alternative things which we control, which we finance, where we provide the ideas and so on, to me that's much more important. That alternative media is what needs to be continually developed.
Now, another issue that's raised in the discussions describing what we were going to talk about in the panel was the rise of the Asian tigers, led, of course, by China and the Belt Road Initiative. Now, when talking about that initiative and what China is trying to do, oftentimes the subtext that's missed is that China is trying to advance China's interests, and anyone else who's benefiting anything seemingly from that is just a secondary beneficiary of the primary Chinese interest. And we know that China is committed to the idea, at least, of some of these large infrastructure projects in Africa, but to serve Chinese interests. Now, how do you see, what kind of response do you expect from people of African heritage? And I use this to include even those in the diaspora or anywhere who have interests in Africa. What kind of response do you see from a Pan-African perspective to address these kinds of issues? I mean, on the one hand, we need good roads, we need large projects, we can't fund them. Someone's coming in with money, they're saying, I'll build that road.